3 spine-chilling true scary tales revealed. Unexplained horrors that haunt and curse you forever. The night was thick with dread. Shadows danced under the pale glow of streetlights, whispering secrets of terror. Karen, a single mother, had just finished another grueling shift at the diner, the exhaustion settling deep in her bones. But as she pulled into her driveway, a chill gripped her heart. A sleek black SUV sat parked across the street, its darkened windows reflecting nothing but the night. She shrugged it off, still preoccupied with thoughts of bills piling up and the chaos of bedtime routines with her 2 boys. Yet, something didn't sit right, a gnawing feeling as if the SUV was a predator waiting in disguise. Days turned into weeks, and Karen's life bled into monotony. Mornings spent getting the kids ready for school bled into frantic hours at work, where she served greasy plates to tired faces. Yet each night the SUV remained. Unwelcome eyes seemed to watch her from the shadows. She tried to ignore it, but the eerie sensation followed her home. It began like a whisper the phone calls. At first, only static hummed back at her, a disembodied breath of something sinister. But soon, disjointed whispers slithered through the receiver, chilling her to the very marrow. Bits of incoherent voices echoed long after she hung up, rattling her resolve. "Mom, there's someone outside," Jake murmured one evening, his voice cracking with fear. The 15-year-old's eyes darted to the window, fear gripping him like a vice. He described a man in a dark coat, lurking, blending into the night. Panic coursed through Karen, the walls of her sanity tightening like a noose. When she confided in her coworkers, they rolled their eyes. Just a stressed mom. They snickered. Even the sheriff, her childhood friend, offered only a raised eyebrow and a dismissive wave, choosing to trust the niceties of suburbia over her spiraling dread. Then came the gathering organized by the new principal. It was supposed to be harmless, a community event. But when Jake didn't come home, a crush of panic overwhelmed Karen. What started as a simple rumor in her mind transformed into a living nightmare. Calls into the dark yielded responses of silence. Friends and neighbors shrugged her off, their laughter sounding hollow and taunting. Desperation gripped her like a vice. Compelled by terror, she immersed herself in local lore, discovering the Watcher, a specter woven into the town's riddles. Fragments of shadows seemed to whisper her name, drawing her deeper into the dread, unveiling a network of whispers that tangled her trust in neighbors and friendships. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she ventured deeper, connection surfaced, and it dawned on her friends wore masks, concealing dark intentions behind polite smiles. The weight of betrayal felt like a specter choking her resolve. The air grew heavy with anticipation as night settled. Just as she braced to confront the lurking shadows, the black SUV's figure caught her eye. A silhouette stood perfectly still, watching, waiting. Her heart raced, and the taste of dread thickened in her throat. Would she find the strength to unmask the evil encroaching upon her family, or had the darkness already claimed its prize? The night closed in like an ominous shroud, curtains of darkness draping over the neighborhood. Karen leaned against her kitchen counter, hands trembling as she scrolled through her phone for any updates from Jake. Panic clawed at her throat. The silence felt loaded, thick with unspoken threats. Each minute that passed heaved her anxiety higher, suffocating her thoughts. Suddenly, the shrill ring of the landline sliced through the oppressive quiet. She jerked, heart racing, and dashed toward the sound, snatching the receiver without checking the caller ID. "Jake?" she breathed, burning with hope that it would be him. But only static blasted in her ear, thick and rasping, like a distant storm. It made her skin prick with fear. "Is anyone there?" she demanded hoarsely, but the line remained dead. Just as she was about to hang up, A low whisper crept through the speaker, a jarring melody she couldn't quite place. Find him, the voice clawed through the static, each word drenched in malice. Yes, waiting, it felt like ice water coursed through her veins, freezing her in place. Somehow she knew it wasn't just a prank. It was a taunt, a challenge. She dropped the phone, breathless, eyes darting back to the darkened house. Where are you, Jake? She whispered into the shadows. An overwhelming instinct drove her to grab her car keys, her heart hammering a panicked rhythm in her chest. She had to get to the place they'd last spoken about. The park, just a few blocks away, nestled between the shadows of towering trees. Maybe Jake was hiding. Maybe he sensed the danger, just like she did as she stepped outside. The cool air wrapped around her like a snake, a stark contrast to the heat of her racing thoughts. The SUV was gone, leaving nothing but an unsettling emptiness in its place. Had it left? Or was it waiting in the dark, just hidden from view? She reached the park, heart racing as her eyes scanned the dimly lit paths. Silence enveloped her, save for the rustle of leaves whispering secret warnings. Each step felt like marching deeper into horror. The shadows moved. They whispered, echoed with dark intentions. She almost turned back when a subtle rustling caught her attention. Jake? She called, voice trembling, echoing off the eerie landscape. Jake! A figure emerged from the shadows, a small silhouette darting between trees. Mom! A shaky voice beckoned, filled with relief and urgency. But before she could call back, a deeper voice followed, cold and commanding, slicing through the night. You shouldn't have come here. The chill of that voice settled over her, gripping her heart in an icy vice. A man stepped into view, tall and menacing, his coat fluttering as if alive, consumed by the darkness. I warned you, he said, the corners of his lips curling into a grin that twisted what little hope she had left. Karen's instincts screamed as she backed away. Turmoil clawed at her mind. Leave my son alone, she shouted, forcing the words through a throat thick with terror. Jake stumbled forward, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The man stepped closer, shadows writhing around him. This is no longer your concern. Suddenly, a sharp, blinding light sliced through the darkness. Headlights swung around, illuminating the scene. Relief surged through Karen as she recognized the sheriff's car, only moments before it careened to a screeching halt. But as he exited, the sinister figure of the man melted back into the shadows, a wraith slipping through the cracks of her reality. Mom, what is happening? Jake's voice wavered, confusion and fear dancing in his eyes as the sheriff rushed toward them, forcing breath back into her lungs. A bitter truth dawned upon Karen. The darkness had many forms. It didn't just linger in the shadows. Where do we go from here? She whispered to herself, dread settling in her gut once more. What had the sinister figure meant? Everything felt unfurling, the threads of their safety unraveling one by one. The sheriff's voice was already questioning, but Karen could only stare back at the darkness, feeling the weight of unseen eyes now, more than ever. And in that moment, she knew their nightmare was far from over. Who else was watching? As the shadows deepened around them, a chilling whisper echoed in her mind, daring her to dig deeper. What did she have to lose? The sheriff approached, urgency in his eyes. His flashlight cut through the darkness, momentarily blistering the shadows. Karen, you need to stay calm, he urged, a tremor in his voice hinting at his own unease. Tell me what happened. She opened her mouth to reply, but her voice faltered. With the overhead light now illuminating the park's twisted branches, she realized they were not alone. The air felt heavier, pressed upon her by unseen forces. I heard a voice, she stammered, flinching at the memories. Said Jake was waiting. The sheriff shifted uneasily, his gaze darting to the treeline. What do you mean by waiting? I don't know. It was dark. There was a man. Panic swelled inside her, twisting her stomach. He was here. Man? Jake's eyes were wide, trying to grasp the situation but failing. What man? Before Karen could respond, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. A low rumble echoed through the park, resonating off the trees. It wasn't thunder. It was deeper, as if something was emerging from below, an awakening of forgotten horrors. "Stay behind me," the sheriff ordered, instinct guiding his movements as he brandished his flashlight like a weapon, scanning the treetops and the path before them. Karen felt Jake clutch her arm, squeezing tight. The chill from before crept in deeper and the wind began to stir, picking up branches and debris, swirling around them like a living thing. The darkness pulled at her, whispering things she'd rather not hear. "Is this some kind of joke?" the sheriff muttered, stepping cautiously closer to the trees. This isn't happening." Suddenly, a deafening crack split through the air. A massive branch broke loose from its tree, crashing down just feet away from them. Karen screamed, instinctively pulling Jake behind her as terror washed over them. Dust and leaves exploded around them, obstructing their view. For a moment, all was still, the air thick with chaos. The sheriff's voice warbled in the din of silence. "Everyone stay put. I'm calling for backup. Please," Karen shouted, her breath hitching. "We need to go. Now." But as she tried to move, a sharp tug in the shadows made her freeze. In that second, a disembodied whisper slithered through the space between them. "Join us," it beckoned, weighty with melancholy, echoing off every surface, burrowing into her mind. "Who's there?" the sheriff shouted, frustration and fear bubbling in his voice. The oppressive sensation intensified, wrapping around them like a noose. "Show yourself." But there was only silence in response. With every beat of her heart, Karen felt the pressure building, gnawing at her sanity. The shadows morphed, twisting unnaturally. A fleeting shape darted by, ruthless and sinister, vanishing and then reappearing closer, taunting them. Mom, Jake whimpered beside her, as pale as any ghost. "No," she screamed, her voice breaking. "We have to go. We can't stay here." "Wait," the sheriff barked, scanning the darkness, desperately trying to pierce through the veil of night's deception. But the shadows laughed then, a soft, chilling sound that curled around them like smoke. "You cannot leave yet." The voice was layered, feeling as if more than one was speaking, each word a horrible tease that sunk deep into her chest. Before she could respond, the lights of another car flickered into view, illuminating the park once more. Two officers stepped out, instantly reaching for their weapons, alert and ready. But as they approached the group, a mysterious heaviness fell around them. "What the hell is going on here?" one of the new officers gasped, eyes wide in horror. Karen's mind raced, pulse pounding so loudly she could barely hear their voices. "We need to find that man," she urged desperately. Yes, dangerous." But in the weight of the words, Karen felt that they were overrun by something more potent than fear. Something that relished in their dread as they stood there, caught between lurking horrors and emerging nightmares. The shadows pulled back slightly only to reveal countless eyes glimmering in the darkness, fixated on them. "No escape," the whispers echoed. "Become part of us." An uneasy tension hung in the air, a horrifying reality creeping in as they all turned to stare into the abyss. Karen's heart sank. What had she unleashed? Just as her breathing slowed, ready to confront the darkness that loomed, the whispers shifted. A single phrase arose above all others. "You've come for him, now he will come for you." The night promised continued terror, and as the shadows closed in, Karen felt a deepening dread settle over her. What else lay hidden in the dark, waiting for night to surrender its secrets? The air was electric, crackling with a dread that twisted the very fabric of the night. Karen could taste the fear like copper on her tongue. She exchanged a frantic glance with Jake. His wide eyes reflected her own terror, amplified by the presence of the glimmering eyes in the dark. "What do we do?" Jake whispered, barely above a breath, gripping her hand tighter, as if she could shield him from whatever lay in those shadows. "Stay close. Just whatever happens, don't let go," Karen replied, trying to anchor him with her words, though doubt gnawed at her gut. "Back away slowly," the sheriff commanded. His voice strained as he gestured for the officers to form a protective barrier. Their flashlights crisscrossed, illuminating twisted branches and the gnarl of shadows, but the brightness only deepened the darkness beyond. Each flicker revealed faces in the darkness, anguished and distorted, clamoring silently for their attention. The officers exchanged worried looks, uncertainty replacing their initial bravado. "Sheriff," one of the new officers began, voice trembling as he pointed towards the tree line. They're moving. I think they shut up," the sheriff barked, cutting him off. His eyes were wide with fear, but his voice held a command that barely masked his pulse's frantic tempo. "We need to stay together." But it was too late. The shadows began to meld, pooling together like a thick fog that slithered closer. The whispers rose in a crescendo, each voice more insistent than the last. "Come become one with us." Layers of grief and desire piled over one another, stretching between the branches, and a cold dread settled over Karen like a shroud. "Get in the car," the sheriff shouted, motioning wildly. In that moment, the night felt like a poised predator, ready to pounce. But as they all turned to rush towards the vehicles, the ground trembled again. This time, not just a low rumble, but a violent shudder that knocked them off balance. Heart racing, Karen stumbled but caught herself. However, Jake was not so lucky. He lost his footing and fell, the wet earth pulling him downward as if it yearned to consume him whole. "Jake!" Karen screamed, lunging towards him. But a pair of spectral hands erupted from the ground beneath him, grasping at his small body with bony fingers, yanking him towards the darkness. "Help!" he cried, his voice a raw edge of terror. The officers scrambled towards him, weapons raised, but the shadows twisted and writhed, enveloping them in a cold embrace. The sheriff shouted orders, but they fell silent in the cacophony of whispers, and one by one, they staggered back, paralyzed by fear. "Jake!" Karen's voice cracked, desperation surging through her veins. She felt the ground quaking beneath her feet, an insidious rhythm syncing with her pulse as she reached for him, tears pooling in her eyes. Clawing hands emerged, thrumming with a palpable power, sucking in the warmth of the air, their skeletal forms glinting with mockery. "You will join us," they hissed, their breath icy against her skin, drawing closer with every heartbeat. Fear shot through her. Karen's heart raced faster than she thought possible. "No, you can't have him," she screamed, throwing herself forward into the maelstrom of shadows, arms outstretched, ready to wrestle her son back from the clutches of hell. But the darkness only laughed, a sound that vibrated in her bones. Suddenly, a blinding light flared from the sheriff's flashlight, illuminating the face of a figure, a man, eerily familiar. His visage twisted with desperation. "Help me," he pleaded through gritted teeth, reaching towards them from the shadows, a last flicker of humanity. Karen's breath hitched. "Jake!" she cried out, her heart splitting as she faced the impossible choice laid before her. Even as she moved, the shadows grew heavier, swirling more frantically around her, hungry and alive. "Choose," they relished, voices merging into one sinister entity. Before she could act, the world shifted, plunging into darkness once more. What would she sacrifice to save her child? Was it too late? As silence fell like a guillotine, the weight of dread surged. With only a haunting whisper left echoing in the void, "Choose wisely." Karen faced the beckoning dark, trembling with the unbearable cost of a mother's love, realizing that some choices could not easily be undone. What would the shadows demand from her next? A frigid stillness blanketed the scene, wrapping around Karen like the cold grip of death. All her senses sharpened, tuning into the subtle shifts in the thick darkness. The whispers curled menacingly around her, tugging at her sanity. "Choose wisely" echoed in her mind, followed by her son's terrified cries that clawed desperately for her attention. Heart pounding, she fought against the overwhelming terror. The figure in the shadows, was it even really there? Or just another play of her fraying mind? She had to act. Every second stretched tenfold. Every breath felt like an eternity. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. "Jake!" Her voice fractured, piercing the darkness. Without thinking, she lunged forward, ignoring the shadows that snaked around her ankles like a creeping fog. She felt their weight trying to pull her down, cold fingers grazing her skin, grazing the edges of her sanity. But her gaze was fixed in one direction, the writhing mass that had taken her son. "Let him go!" she screamed, summoning all her strength and defiance. The shadows hissed in return, a symphony of torment. Join us, the flashlight's beam flickered, casting fluttering light across the trees momentarily, then brightened again only to reveal yet more faces pressed against the dimensional plane of reality. Mouths open in silent screams, eyes void of innocence. The sight shattered her, filling her with anguish. They looked so familiar, their features warped by despair. Were these the lost souls of those who had come before her? "Jake, grab my hand." She stretched out her arm, her heart racing as the ground beneath him struggled to consume him whole. The shadowy hands clawed at her, pulling her back, desperate to keep her in the dark. With monstrous strength, Karen tore through the grasping soil, and there Jake was, his face twisted in sheer terror. Their eyes locked, and a flicker of recognition sparked within her. "Mom!" he cried, and with that broken word, the last shred of her resolve burned hotter. She yanked with everything inside her, a surge of love propelling her forward. Yet, with each moment, the shadows grew bold, tearing at her resolve, their whispering demands echoing louder. Join us, panic welled in her throat as she felt her own body succumbing to the shadows, bits of her soul snagged in those grasping hands. The eyes around her, all those broken, yearning eyes seemed to draw her closer. They wanted her. She could feel the pull, the hunger of despair curling deep within her. "No!" she screamed, shoving back against the darkness. She focused on Jake. His face was pale, stricken with fear, but there was a fire in those eyes that called her forward. "Take my hand. I want to let go." With one last effort, she reached for him, and he stretched out, fingers brushing against hers. Their connection sparked like lightning. The moment her hand closed around his, a surge rippled through them, jolting the shadows like a thunderclap. The ground bucked beneath them, twisting wildly. "No!" the voices protested, shrieking in agony as they were forced to release their prize. But it wasn't over yet. The shadows coiled angrily and the ground shook violently, sending debris flying. The trees around them bent and twisted, transported by a malevolent force. "Run!" the sheriff shouted, but Karen didn't need prompting. She pulled Jake to his feet, adrenaline flooding her veins. They tore toward the vehicles, blurred shapes moving frantically, all void of direction. Behind them, the shadows screamed, howling in unison, a cacophony echoing the deep, relentless void as they neared the cars. Jake stopped abruptly. "Mom, wait! The man!" he gasped, bewilderment clouding his voice. Karen hesitated, dread washing over her. The man was still there, just beyond the fringe of the shadows, his face twisted in both pain and recognition. "Help!" he implored again, desperation and familiarity. Time slowed, her pulse raced, and within that still moment, a choice loomed larger than the shadows. She could pull Jake away, save him, or extend a hand to the man who seemed to know this horror better than they did. The darkness was closing in, the whispers swirling louder. "Choose," they taunted, relishing the chaos. Her heart thudded painfully. What would salvation cost her? "Mom!" Jake's hands squeezed hers tightly, anchoring her, but she already felt the darkness clawing at her other foot. Her decision hung in the air like a pendulum, weighing each second with dread. What choice would she make? The shadows writhed impatiently, and an unnatural chill scratched across her skin. They waited. Would she join the lost, or fight for the light? Karen's breath quickened as the decision loomed larger than the shadows themselves. She could feel the panic suffocating her, tightening around her throat like a noose. The man's eyes were desperate, filled with a wild, haunting pain. "Help!" His voice cracked, a sound that merged with the shrill whispers coming from every crevice of the dark. "Mom, we have to go!" Jake pulled at her arm, his grip shaking, his eyes wide with fear. She scanned the faces in the void, their silent screams tugging at her heart. Were they warning her, or luring her in? "Choose!" The shadows taunted again, their voices swirling like an ill wind through the trees, wrapping around her ribs, squeezing tighter. The man was still there, his face a mask of anguish, yet somehow familiar. She felt something an inexplicable link to him, as if somehow he had been part of her life. The horror tugged at her mind. Was he a victim too? Or something far worse? Help him, Mom, Jake begged, his voice piercing her daze. But with every second, the shadows seeped in closer, their cold breath brushing against her, caressing her like a lover shear in the dark. Karen was wavering. Her heart was a drum in her chest, a frantic rhythm pushing to a conclusion. Mom, Jake cried, pulling harder. Please, not him. The man's voice cut through the chaos again. You can save us both. Could she? Felt impossible. Each option weighed heavy: save her son or try to pull this lost soul from the shadows, bringing him toward the light. Suddenly, as if sensing her conflict, the ground beneath them convulsed. The shadows quivered, hungry and impatient. No, don't listen to him. The shadows hissed, their grasp tightening around her ankles, dragging her into their depths. Karen's instincts screamed for survival. She had to protect Jake. Jake, we need to go, she rasped, turning from the man, feeling her heart break with each step away. She pulled her son toward freedom, their breaths mingling with terror. But Jake's cries pierced through her. No, Mom, you don't understand. We have to run. Now, she shouted, desperation coating her words like a thick fog. Just as they took a step away, she felt something change. The air thickened, charged like before a storm. She hesitated, her heart and mind racing. Mom, Jake's voice trembled with fear. I think he's trying to tell you something. They were suddenly plunged back into brightness, the headlights of the cars now illuminating the dark forces that swirled about them. But there was something heavy in the air, a tangible weight that pressed against Karen's chest. The trees cracked like bones in agony, limbs shifting unnaturally as if the shadows had tangled them in their net. Join us, the shadows cried, their voices a desperate plea now. The man, center stage in their nightmare, began to elongate, twisting unnaturally. He lunged forward as if breaking free from the shadows, now clawing at the ground, reaching for Karen. Help! Suddenly, the shadows erupted, a tidal wave of tormented screams. Karen felt the pull of their despair, a tug on her very essence. Don't! She yelled, fighting against the wave as it rolled toward them, ready to devour them whole. In that moment, time lurched, and she felt something cold and sinister wrapping around her mind. Images flooded her thoughts, flashes of the man, an old park, laughter, then shadows snaking into the light. What had he done? Why was he here? Run, she ordered, and they bolted back toward the cars. But the ground quaked violently beneath them, trying to ensnare them once more. And in the madness, she couldn't shake the feeling. The man was more than a victim. He was an anchor to this nightmare. As they reached the vehicles, she turned back one last time. The man's eyes met hers, filled with a haunting mix of rage and sorrow. Help me break free, he shouted, or you'll all be trapped forever. The shadows surged, and the ground cracked apart, splitting wide like a gaping maw. Caught between the horror of despair and the instinct to flee, what would she choose next? Mom, please, Jake's quaking voice echoed in her ears, grounding her for just a second. Could she stand by and watch this man be consumed? Or would his fate drag them all down with him? The darkness pulsed hungrily, waiting. What choice would come next? And what truth lay shrouded in the depths of shadows? Karen's heart raced as she clutched Jake's hand tightly, feeling the warmth of his grasp against the chilling embrace of the night. The tree line behind them loomed like black sentinels, shadows writhing against the faint glow of the headlights. For an instant, she pondered the man's plea, searching for answers in the depths of those haunted eyes. Could he help them? Would digging deeper into the past lead to their doom? Mom, we can't stay here, Jake yelled, his voice breaking through her hesitation. He tugged on her arm, pulling them closer to freedom, closer to the safety of the car. Each step felt like an act of betrayal, leaving the man behind, but the ground still trembled beneath their feet, as if it could sense their indecision. The whispers grew louder, clawing at her mind. "Save him, save us all," they beckoned like sirens, each word infused with temptation. The air thickened, tangling itself around her senses, suffocating her resolve. "Mom, please." Jake's eyes were wide, reflecting both fear and determination. She hesitated yet again, glancing back towards the writhing darkness. The man's figure flickered, a ghost tearing itself from the fabric of the night, a mere shadow of despair battling to break free. "You don't know what's at stake," he yelled, and his desperate voice sent chills racing down her spine. "If you leave me, every soul here will suffer more. We all are entangled. I can help you escape." "Mom, no!" Jake screamed, pulling her away as if sensing the insidious pull. But the shadows thickened, slithering up her ankles, trying to anchor her in place, whispering dark promises of knowledge, of resolution, of truth. She felt her legs weaken, the anchor of her heart torn between love for her son and the lingering guilt towards the figure in the shadow. "Your choice seals our fates," the man shouted one last time, before the darkness swallowed his words in a cacophony of howls. It was a sound that scraped at her sanity, like nails on a chalkboard, reaching into her very core. Shadows undulated wildly, beckoning her closer, and a surge of panic. She finally turned and sprinted after Jake, the thunder of her heart consuming her thoughts. They barreled toward the car, but Karen could feel the waves of darkness crashing behind them, disorienting her. Every instinct in her screamed that they needed to drive away, but something deeper kept tugging, urging her to uncover the truth buried beneath the chaos. "Mom, they're coming," Jake gasped, glancing back as the shadows twisted into shapes that screamed and danced, tortured victims made from the very fabric of nightmares. Karen's hand shook as she fumbled for the door handle. "What do I do, Jake?" she gasped, her voice quaking. "What if he's right?" The shadows coiled at her feet, desperate for her consent, a siren call pooling beneath her skin. "Mom, we can't let them in," Jake cried, yanking her away from the door. "We have to leave now." A cold dread washed over Karen, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of decision. The headlights flickered, illuminating the swirling chaos and the agony of the souls bound to this place, their faces distorted in a spectral wail as the shadows pressed in heavier. Suddenly, it hit her, a memory buried deep, like the roots of those trees. It flashed before her eyes. A family picnic, a bright day, laughter that ceased too soon. "Mom!" Jake's voice snapped her back, urgency cutting through the fog. But the moment had passed, and she felt it, the undeniable connection. The man in the shadows wasn't just a victim. He was woven into the tapestry of her past, a thread she couldn't ignore. "Hold on tight," she shouted, shifting the car into drive, the engine screaming to life. As they peeled away, she risked one last glance back at the tumbling shadows roiling behind them. Closer than ever, glimmers of familiar darkness flickered in the headlights. "Wait," she called out into the dark, caught between fleeing and understanding. "What did you have to do with me?" The shadows seemed to pulse, waiting, thick with secrets just out of reach. What had she unleashed? What truth lay hidden, waiting for her return? And how could she escape the history tied to that anguished face when the darkness threatened to follow her? The road stretched ahead, an endless ribbon of asphalt shadowed by trees that whispered secrets in the dark. Karen gripped the steering wheel, hands clammy and cold. The engine's roar nothing but a distant echo against the chaos still lurking behind them. Jake stared out the passenger window, his breaths coming in short, sharp gasps, as if the very act of exhaling might draw the darkness closer. "Did you see them, Mom?" Jake's voice trembled. "They were people." What were they? Her heart sank. She didn't want to admit it, but the faces had been disturbingly familiar, twisted in agony and despair. "I don't know, honey," she managed, forcing her eyes back to the road. Each flicker of headlights cast jarring shadows that danced on the edges of her peripheral vision, almost as if they were trying to communicate. She could feel the shadows pressing in, just out of sight, relentless in their pursuit. "What if they follow us?" Jake blurted out, his voice rising in terror. What if they come after us? His fear was palpable, suffocating. Karen's mouth went dry. They won tea. The assurance felt weak. We left them behind, she added, trying to convince both him and herself. But doubt wormed its way deeper into her mind. The man's words haunted her, ringing like a death knell filled with threats and promises. They should have stayed. No, it wasn't he, just the man. It was every soul entwined with that cursed place. They had evaded one danger but stepped blindly into another, into the dark unknown. As the trees closed in on both sides, an unease settled over her. They were no longer just fleeing. They were being watched. A prickling sensation crawled down her spine. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she could almost hear them, the faint whispers rising from the depths of memory. Come back, return, Mom. Jake's urgent shout broke her focus. Look, he pointed ahead, and her breath quickened. The horizon was shifting, dark clouds swirling ominously as a sudden chill swept through the cabin. The air grew thick with tension, and the car lights struggled to cut through the growing blackness. A sudden burst of wind slammed against the car, pushing it sideways momentarily. A flash of movement caught her eye. A figure appeared in the road, barely illuminated but unmistakable. The man. He stood there, an apparition clad in shadows, arms stretched wide as if holding back the delicate balance of night and day. Mom! Jake screamed, panic bubbling. It's him. Hold on. Karen yelled, adrenaline surging through her as she swerved, narrowly avoiding the ghostly figure. The car fishtailed, tires screeching against the pavement. But something inside her said to stop, to confront the truth that smoldered beneath the surface. Don't go back, Jake cried, his voice a mixture of terror and disbelief. Karen's heart raced, pounding against her rib cage like a desperate prisoner. I have to, she breathed, a compulsion pulling at her heartstrings. The shadows behind them writhed, eager as old memories threatened to resurface. With a heavy sigh, she swung the wheel and turned the car around, heading back towards that gaping maw of darkness. Jake's protests fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the roar of fate closing in. But as the headlights pierced the swirling gloom, a figure emerged from the depths, a woman this time, her face a mirror of anguish. Terror gripped Karen's heart as the woman raised a hand, her eyes wide with recognition, pain etched into every line of her face. The connection cracked open a long-buried wound, a fragment of a life that Karen had thought she left behind. What do you want from me? Karen shouted into the shifting abyss, her voice trembling, echoing back 1,000 unanswered questions. The shadows shifted, twisting around the vehicle as if waiting for her response. Shapes loomed, familiar and grotesque faces formed from the darkness, each one haunted by the pain of unfinished stories. History rippled in the air. A fragile string once woven between them was now taut, ready to snap. And in that pivotal moment, darkness shifted and twisted, revealing a truth so shocking it poured icy dread through her veins. What if they're family? Jake whispered, his voice trembling as the shadows closed in around them. What? Karen asked, but deep down, she felt the answer claw its way to the surface. As the whispers grew louder, wrapping around her mind like creeping vines, she realized she was no longer the one in control. The choices ahead could lead them back into the depths or straight toward the light. But now the stakes had risen. This was only the beginning of a far darker tale than she ever imagined. Would they survive? Or would they be swallowed whole? The night deepened around them, a suffocating blanket of darkness as the wind howled and the trees bent under its relentless pressure. Jake huddled against the door, his small body trembling. Mom, he whispered, fear dripping from each syllable. The woman, the specter from their past, advanced slowly through the shadows, her face twisted in a silent scream that echoed within Karen's mind, unmistakable and horrifying. Stay in the car, Karen instructed, her voice barely escaping her lips. She felt the weight of Jake's stare, his wide, terrified eyes boring into her. She wanted nothing more than to reassure him, to pull him close and flee into the safety of the night. But the figure before them commanded a twisted curiosity. The shadows coiled tightly, whispering secrets only she could hear. You'll never escape, they hissed, a chorus of distorted voices weaving through the air like smoke. The chill wrapped around her, paralyzing. Yet, deep down, a sinister curiosity gnawed at her. Why was the woman so familiar? What bonds had previously linked them? As she opened her door, the cold air rushed in, sharp and biting. She stepped out onto the asphalt, the sound of crunching gravel echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. "What do you want?" she called out, her voice betraying her shaking resolve. Slowly, the woman moved closer, her eyes reflecting the dim glow of the headlights, revealing a depth of sorrow Karen had thought long buried. "You came back at last," she mourned, her voice soft but laced with an unmistakable urgency. "You have to listen, Mom." "Don't," Jake yelled, jumping out of the passenger side. Panic fueled his urgency. "We can't stay here. We have to go." But something about the woman's gaze pierced through Karen's fear. "Your family forgotten. You left us. You left me. Who are you?" Karen's heart hammered in her chest, an insistent drum of dread. The wind shrieked, pulling at her clothes, urging her back. Yet the specter pressed closer, revealing more of herself as the darkness seemed to breathe her in. "I am." The woman shuddered, catching her breath like a weight pulling her down into murky waters. "I am the reason you could never leave. We are all bound by your choice. You must choose again." The forest closed in around her. Each shadow seemed to pulse with life, tugging at the edges of her sanity. Memories crashed into Karen, laughter that echoed, faces that shimmered in blurred light, and floods of blood that soaked the ground beneath her feet. "Mom, we have to go," Jake urged again, grasping her arm. The persistent tingle of danger swelled in the air, and the whispering voices escalated, drowning out anything coherent. But Karen couldn't move. The weight of ancestral pain pinned her down. "I didn't want to leave," she murmured, a part of her surrendering to the truth the shadows demanded she confront. "I thought I could protect him." The woman's eyes, once shadowed with sorrow, glinted with a sinister spark. "You can't protect him from what you're a part of. You have to face it. You have to make a choice." A violent wind swept through the clearing, catching her hair and tossing it back. The trees howled in protest, and with it the figures emerged. More faces twisted in despair, crowding behind the woman, forming an unbroken chain that tethered Karen to that dark place. "Mom, please." Jake's panicked voice broke through the swelling tide of voices, awakening her to the reality of her childish fear. The urgency of their situation crashed over her like a tidal wave. "What if I can't save him?" Karen asked, her voice cracking. The choices ahead felt like a looming cliff, waiting for one misstep that could lead them both into oblivion. The figures edged closer, their breath cold against her skin. "Then you must decide," the woman whispered, her words laced with foreboding. "Will you forsake him to save yourself? Or will you reclaim what was lost?" The darkness swirled, the weight of her ancestry clawing at her soul. The choice loomed like a specter in the dark. In that suffocating silence, one question echoed. Which would she choose, salvation or damnation? The headlights flickered ominously, casting a fleeting glimmer of hope against a backdrop of despair. As the shadows deepened, whispers turned to howls, and with each breath, they deadened the light. Karen felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, the choice pressing down on her like an iron weight. The air crackled with tension, and she had only seconds before the answer would be taken from her, whether she was ready or not. What would she leave behind? What could she embrace? Time was slipping away, and there was no turning back now. Karen stood on the precipice of a decision that could unearth the buried truths of her life, and either free her from a haunting past or bind her forever in darkness. Each soul around her, twisted in misery, breathed life into her own dread. "Mom, please." Jake's desperate plea spiraled through her panic, his small frame shaking beside her. The air thrummed with oppressive energy, the shadows swirling tighter as if waiting for her sacrifice. She felt the weight of generations upon her, decisions made long before her time, choices that had brought doom to countless lives. "What do you want from me?" she cried. "What do I have to choose?" "Your past lies here," the woman responded, sorrow laced with something sharper. It yearns for reconciliation. You must either embrace it or abandon your son to save yourself. The choice is a perilous one. For a split second, Karen hesitated, fear gripping her heart. The twisted faces in the shadows seemed to sparkle with an unholy triumph as if they relished in her turmoil. Behind her, Jake pulled at her arm, eyes wide, pleading, "Mom, if you don't choose us, if you listen to them, they'll take you. We need to go. Now." In that moment, all the love and fear for her son surged within her like a tidal wave. She could not leave Jake. Whatever truth lay behind those haunted eyes, it would have to wait. "No, you'll never have him," she screamed, the sound resonating with defiance as the shadows hissed in protest. She felt her heart pound against the weight of the night. "I choose my son." Her voice echoed, piercing through the cacophony of whispers. With a surge of energy, she yanked Jake to her chest, wrapping her arms around him, shielding him from the shadows that sought to engulf them. "Go," she shouted, her voice breaking. "Run." They bolted toward the car, the throaty engine roaring like a beast awakened. But before they reached safety, something pulled at Karen's feet, cold fingers wrapping around her ankles. The shadows hissed, "You cannot escape." In the desperate moment, she twisted and clawed her way free, her heart shattering at the anguished cries around her, echoes of lost voices screaming to be saved. She turned back, just for a moment, and saw the group of tortured souls writhing in agony, their eyes filled with sorrow and a desperate longing for release. The urge to help them clawed at her heart. But no, not yet. "Mom, please," Jake's voice quavered, dragging her focus back. "Get in." With a final burst of strength, Karen freed herself and stumbled into the car. The headlights illuminated the dark forest, exposing the twisted faces for a fleeting moment before being swallowed back into the depths. She threw the car into gear and peeled away, wheels screeching against asphalt, hearts pounding together in synchrony as they raced down the road. The weight of the darkness lifted. Behind them, a monstrous wail erupted, a cacophony of frustration echoing in the night air. It was a promise of retribution, not just for their escape but for the choice Karen had made. Did we lose them?" Jake gasped, breathless, staring back into the onslaught of trees. Karen could only nod, gripping the wheel tighter, feeling the exhaustion clawing at her like a relentless beast. "For now," she murmured, though her heart knew better. "For now." The headlights pierced the enveloping darkness, revealing a sense of freedom that felt nearly tangible. Yet a terror lingered in the pit of her stomach. Had they truly escaped? The shadows that had once echoed their past were now biding their time, plotting and lurking just outside of the light. "Mom?" Jake broke the uneasy silence, voice trembling with uncertainty. "What if they come for us again?" Karen exhaled slowly, her heart heavy but resolute. "Then we face them together, I promise." As they continued down the winding road, the dawn began to break, casting a golden hue across the horizon. In that moment, light surged through the windows, illuminating their faces, softening the palpable fear etched on their features. Though the memories of their encounter weighed heavy, Karen felt a small flicker of hope, a belief that perhaps they could rebuild the life that darkness sought to steal. With determination in her voice, she made a silent vow. Never again would she allow shadows to claim what was hers. Transformed by terror and strengthened through love, she would protect her son at all costs. "Where do we go from here?" Jake asked, exhaustion starting to settle in. Karen smiled softly, the warmth of the sunrise igniting something new within her. "Wherever we want, Jake. Wherever we want." And as they ventured forward into the light of a new day, Karen whispered a quiet prayer that their story of survival would not be forgotten. But little did she know, the shadows still lingered, ever watchful in the corners of the night, waiting for the moment when they would inevitably return. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will keep you on edge. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference, trust me. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. I want to hear what you think. And for the true fans out there, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this conclusion. Show your support.